The opposition to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth deciding to just kill anyone who has a boat in the Caribbean or now in the Pacific is starting to grow. Obviously, lefties, Democrats, people who think that the US government shouldn't just choose who to murder at will, they've always been against it. But now even some Republicans are coming out and being like, hey, maybe we could at least demonstrate that they're at least doing the crime you say you're doing before we murder them on the high seas. And so let's start off with a couple of senators who are now out and out against this.
And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public. So it's wrong.
The administration needs to give insight into Congress. That's part of it. If this was happening with this level of insight under the Biden administration, I'd be apoplectic. That's important. We're all elected officials. We're in a co-equal branch of government, and we've got to be able to have that kind of coordination.
Yeah, and Langford there is right. They would have been freaking out if Joe Biden or if Obama had been doing this. I think they'd be kind of pretending. I don't think they'd actually have a problem with it, but they would at least imply that the president should not be taking upon himself to be judge, jury, and executioner for rando people from Venezuela or whatever. And so they're at least being consistent in that. And some former members of the US military are now coming out against this as well. Here is an editorial that was written for The Bulwark by Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, the former commander of US Army Europe. Says multiple reports describe lethal US airstrikes on suspected drug smuggling vessels in international waters. However justified those actions may be to some, for those pulling the triggers, they raise serious questions of legality and legitimacy. Who authorizes the use of deadly force against non-state actors, just suspected criminals in peacetime? What standards of evidence apply? How do partner nations perceive a supercarrier conducting combat operations near their coasts? These are all questions that military commanders ask. When military power substitutes for diplomacy, both suffer. And it's possible that in our military commanders are asking those sorts of questions, but unfortunately, our military right now is not being run by a military commander. It's being run by a former talk show host and alleged sexual predator who doesn't care about any of that stuff. He does what Donald Trump says to do, because if he said no, that would be it. He'd be, best case scenario, sitting next to Pete Ducey again, mornings on Fox. And that's best case scenario. And so you're not gonna get those questions. And so instead, yes, we're not just bombing them. We've sent a super carrier fleet to the region. And by the way, so he goes on in this editorial to point out that that's like using a brain surgeon to stitch a finger. It's way over the top. But also, that's not why we sent the super carrier. We didn't send it there to bomb some speedboats. We have proven ourselves fully capable of doing that. We sent the supercarrier as a prelude to land bombings of Venezuela and potentially an actual invasion of Venezuela. Donald Trump announced last week he was open about the fact that CIA teams are now operating inside of Venezuela. The president of Venezuela announced earlier today that they've captured one of those CIA teams. Now, we don't know for sure if that's true. I haven't seen any confirmation of that. But Trump told the world that they're on the ground in Venezuela, so it's certainly possible. And here's the thing. That seems like bad news for Donald Trump, right? If a CIA team gets captured, but is it? Seems like a pretext possibly to heighten up tensions with Venezuela even more. What if they were to lock up those CIA agents? Or God forbid, execute them, as we've executed rando civilians from Venezuela? That's even more pretext to begin bombing Venezuela, because the goal isn't to blow up a speedboat, many of which, by the way, literally couldn't even make it to America's shores. And they know that. They're lying to us about the actual status of those boats. It's regime change in Venezuela. And so Rand Paul at least would be consistent, hopefully, in opposing that. I think they can all see that that's the direction this is pointing in. Jared, what do you make of this?
They're basically saying it, that's what they're looking for. Senator Rick Scott, Stephen Miller, both have said things that confirm that's the plan. Rick Scott literally said, I think that's what's going to happen. Because he's like, I might as well say it now. I'm cornered on this by just seeing the information. But they think it's so like cut and dry and done, and we could do anything we want. They're willing to admit these things, and it's supposed to be normalized now as perfect. Like declaring war. He's even said, I don't have to declare anything. I can just kill people. Like he had a bit of a hum. The president had a hum to it when he said kill people. He loves it. Like he's literally bloodthirsty. And Pete Hegseth sits next to him and wants all that. And Side note on Pete Hegseth, John, he never sat next to Ducey. He was on the weekends because that's how much of a loser he was over on Fox. But you got Rand Paul and Langford talking about it, right? They're saying the right things. Similarly, like a few folks on the Republican side who say the right things every once in a while, we should look at what they say and then find out what they do afterwards. Maybe I've missed it. I'm not sure what Rand Paul and Langford have done since he's supposed to be apoplectic about it. But how about you do something like, actionably about it? None of them want to do it. So why are you talking about it if you don't want to do anything about it? It's to cover and save their own asses and make themselves look good for maybe 5 minutes on a Sunday show and have people not think they're on board for this. What are you doing is always the next question. It's just not there.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I'm not saying they're great. I'm saying they're at least saying something. And I love that your knowledge of Fox and Friends lore is much deeper than my own. I reference it, but I'm a poser when it comes. I'm not really a fan.